Morning, everybody. How are you doing? Anyways, let's start off the interview. Mr. Jonpaul Balak interviewing Bob Spickard of the Chantays.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm very sorry to hear that you almost passed twice last night. It's a little disturbing, but we're very glad that you're here with us still, right? Let's give a big round of applause for Mr. Jeff. Big TC Dude Hansen, everybody. Working like a madman to put this on for you guys. And let's welcome our esteemed guest this morning, live in the flesh, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Bob Spickard of the Chantays.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, sir.
A literal living legend. You know how we are with this stuff, as geeky as we get, there's nothing like getting the bona fide dirt direct from the source. You know, this is not hearsay, this is not, oh, I read this interview by this guy, of this guy, of this guy. No, we're talking right with Bob. He's right here. We're so lucky to have him. We're going to open up at the end for some questions from you guys. If there's any burning thing that you've been wanting to ask Bob, or dealing with the Chantays or the first wave or anything, please feel free to ask him at the end. But we're going to get into some nitty-gritty, some history, some gory details about the Chantays. He's going to leave it all on the floor here for you guys, for you nerds. And I mean that in the most loving way, because that's what I am. So we're all, right there. All right. So, yes, sir. Why don't we start with the burning question? The first thing usually, if you mention the Chantays, that means pipeline. And that conjures up the sound of that glissando at the beginning. The famous gliss, the gliss of all glisses, right?
Yeah, we like to think so. However, Mozart did it.
Yeah, but not in the same way. Mozart didn't, well, how did that come about?
Well, the glissando actually evolved. The original demo of Pipeline, which was done at PAL Records out in Rancho Cucamonga, the original demo, we were into more of a Dwayne Eddy-ish type sound, and instead of the glissando, it went to burn-y, darny, 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 and da-da-da-da-da. Well, that was on our first demo, which was, like, say, recorded at PAL Records in Cucamonga. And that particular thing is what our then manager went out and shopped. And in essence, everybody turned us down until we got to finally to this one little label that had a local hit called Boss by the Rumblers. And it was at Wenzel's Music Town in Downey. And Bill Wenzel, the head of Wenzel Music, said, well, I'll take it on, but I want to re-record it in my studio. It's a music store that had a studio in the back. And so we said, okay, fine. So we ended up in the intro before that is when the glissando kind of evolved. And that was almost become a signature.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Now, was it a spontaneous thing? Like, did it just happen, or had you been premeditating, like, oh, we got to figure out a cool intro thing?
Pretty much got to give Brian Carmen, the credit for. Brian and I would practice almost every day after school. We were all had gone to high school together. And
that's Santa Ana, right?
Santa Ana High School. And after school, we would go to either his house or my house and just practice and show each other certain things that we might have learned in the interim, certain chords, because we were both pretty much just beginning guitar players. And consequently, that's where somewhere in that line, it evolved. So another interesting thing, too, is after we did the recording at Downey, Pipeline was going to be the A side. Well, they thought, Move It, the B side, is a better dance tune. So they said, well, let's go ahead and move it, the A side, of which they did. And it was getting a little bit of airplay in San Bernardino, KFXM in San Bernardino, and all KAFY in Bakersfield. And almost simultaneously, it wasn't getting any real reception. So one of the DJs out at KFXM said, you got to turn that record over. So they flipped it over and started playing Pipeline, and the phones began to ring. Phones kept...
Of course they did.
And so the rest of that is history. However, we did move it in a Coca-Cola commercial about 4 years ago. So it redeemed itself.
Good. Now, the interesting thing about that is, Pipeline is a very moody, very subdued, kind of minor, mysterious, quiet song. This is not like a radio-friendly thing. And it's completely different from what was happening in the surf world with the high-energy style of Dick Dale and the, what I like to call the guitar god type bands, right? Very, very different from that. This is much more pulled back, much more subdued. It is very hypnotic. Very hypnotic. But
and we weren't even on drugs.
Yeah. Good for you, man. That came much later.
No.
I kid. When you put that on and you're immersed in it, if you're actively listening to that song, you're just swept away by that mystery, right? And that first E minor chord that comes in, and the fact that you had keyboards right from the beginning, from the very, very, very beginning, even the first gig, right? He had to play an upright piano that was supplied, right?
We carried an upright.
No kidding.
Some of our early gigs, that's Rob Marshall, our keyboard player's dad, had a pickup truck. We'd take him to a gig, and it was just kind of prior to the Wurlitzer, which is what we used on Pipeline, which is the old style Wurlitzer that you had to tune it. You tune it with the soldering gun. It had reeds. And to tune it, and they weren't really good on the road. So what would happen is Rob would always carry a soldering iron to tune up when we were on the road until a little bit later then became the roads, which was like godsend in a lot of ways. So
let's say you went into PAL to do the demo.
Yes.
Did you intend to have acoustic piano? Were you like, okay, well, we've always played it with this upright. That's how we're going to record it.
No, by the time we did the demo, we got the Wurlitzer.
Okay.
Yeah, the upright only lasted about 4 or 5 gigs.
And what was it about?
What you got, Jeff?
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. But I have a program here. I appreciate that, but let me just thank you. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry. Okay.
Outlet.
What was it about that Wurlitzer sound or the electric piano sound that made you think, well, we got to switch from the regular piano to this particular thing, or was it purely a practical thing for gigs?
It was totally practical.
Okay.
Yeah, we couldn't carry that upright around that thing.
So you didn't necessarily hear a song with electric piano and go, oh man, we got to have that sound.
No,
it was
part of just condensing the weight factor, and it obviously ended up working out quite well.
Oh yes. Oh my God. Now it's iconic. That sound. So if you're going to play that
same basic Wurlitzer style piano that Ray Charles used in What I Say. You know, it has a certain distinctive sound. Now, there was obviously a difference a little bit in the sound between the Rhodes and the Wurlitzer, but the Rhodes just became a better traveling unit.
Sure. And then it became a signature part of the sound.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I love that you always kept that the keyboards, as a very important part of the band.
Very much so. Up until, well, the later generation, we added another guitar player instead of the keyboard, but that's another story.
Yeah. I was going to say, speaking of things that didn't last, in the very, very, very beginning, you had Jim Frias on saxophone,
Yes, we did.
right?
Yep.
But it was really short-lived, right?
Roughly a month.
No kidding.
Yeah, roughly about a month. Jim was another schoolmate. He was a few years behind us, but at that point in time in our starting and our doing this, we were experimenting with a couple of different people that until it evolved into what became the five of us. That ended up doing Pipeline and Move It.
And it was those first couple of gigs, right, at the Tustin
Youth Center.
Tustin Youth Center, when you started to really understand, okay, that guy's gonna work, or he knows what he's doing,
Exactly.
like, well, that's gotta go, or so you eventually.
That first gig at the Tustin Youth Center, our drummer, Bob Welch, didn't have his own set, so we rented a set of drums from another classmate who drummed with us once or twice, but was not quite up to par. So Bob ended up getting his own drum set, but that first gig at the youth center, it was the upright piano was there, and a rented drum kit, and we actually made, I think, $25 a piece. So
Righteous bucks.
we figured, man, we are making bucks now. And we had actually put on that show ourselves. We hired a couple of friends to collect the money, and it worked so well that the following gig, that's after we had this reverb experience.
Yeah, we need to get into that. That's one of the best stories ever.
But anyway, we decided to host another show at the youth center, and in that show we made I think $75 a piece. So we figured, man, we are making money now. We're getting the girls. We're just just trying to live a good.
You were living the dream at the second gig. No wonder you were excited about everything. Who knew you'd have a number 1 hit?
Yeah, it was. I can remember the first time I heard it on the radio. I think, before originally it was on KFXM. Couldn't get LA to play any surf music at that point in time, or any instrumental. They were primarily focused on East Coast acts, and so when Pipeline got up into the top 10 out in San Bernardino, LA finally had KRLA and KFWB, and they finally got on the bandwagon and started playing, and it just, once again, the phone started ringing. People were loving it. We were loving it. It was fun going to school. On your way to school, they're playing your record on the radio, on the AM radio. And
That must have been such an amazing feeling. Did the kids at school know that was you and your band, and were they,
oh yeah,
impressed and enamored? And
well, it was kind of funny because some of our teachers were a little bit jealous, because we were making more money than they were. But
that's great.
and another interesting offshoot of that, we became the only rock and roll band or surf band to have been on the Lawrence Welk show.
Yeah.
And
I know I can speak for this whole room probably, where we've spent, hours watching that on YouTube.
with our parents or grandparents.
Yeah. Seeing, obviously the moves, the choreographed moves are very special. Very, very special and unique, and, testimony to your kind of show band
Well,
attitude, the way you would go into it.
That's what we felt comfortable about doing some choreography and that. And back in those days, everybody had this, they wore the same suits. We had these collarless, they were called Chantays, almost the Nero type jackets.
Those are so cool.
Where we were all looked like a band. And all of our stage equipment was all the same color. And
All sunburst, yeah?
the guitars, yeah, and the bass. So, and then the funny thing about that Rhodes piano, when they first came out, they were blonde. And Harold Rhodes we were doing a session at Downey, and he brought up the Rhodes for us to try out, and said, "Well, this is well and cool, but all of our other stuff is black. Our black reverbs, our black, at that time, our bass player was using a black Showman. And Brian and I each had a 410 concert that was a predecessor of the Super Reverb. But everything was black. We told Rhodes, we said, "Hey, you know, we'd really like this, but we need a black one." And he goes, "Why would you want a black one?" And it's like, duh, it's a piano. It's like on a grand piano, it's black generally. And so anyway, we had the very first black Showman. Excuse me, black Rhodes piano. And so that was just another thing where you all tried to look uniform, and the choreography just kind of evolved from that, looking, you know, like we were together.
That's so cool. And you had a massive reaction to that Lawrence Welk show. That really was a point where things really escalated in your career.
Well, most common misnomer is I get people come up, he says, "Hey, I saw you on Ed Sullivan." I said, no. But then you tell them, no, we were on the Lawrence Welk show. But I'll tell you, that was a 2-day shoot. And our teachers, we were in high school. Our teachers we had to have notes to get out of class to go up to. We did our testing at the Pantages on one day, and then the following day we were at Sunset, up off of Sunset Boulevard, up at ABC, I think it was. That's where they actually would film the show. But it was quite an experience, literally, you know. And our peers all kind of got behind us. We did a lot of the, you know, dances at the school, and we were inspired by a lot of different people back in those days. You know, one of our main inspirations were the group called the Rhythm Rockers that were playing originally at Santa Ana Community Center, and that we would go, before we started actually playing, we'd go and listen to the Rhythm Rockers on a Friday night, and once again, we were thinking, hey, these guys are making money, they're getting the girls, they're doing all this and that. We got to think about doing this. So we just decided, well, you learn to play the bass, you learn to play the guitar, and it just evolved from there. So we just kind of put it all together.
That's so cool. Now, did you ever make it down to the Rendezvous?
Played the Rendezvous from 1962 till it burnt down.
I mean, in the beginning, did you ever see, you know, one of the shows at the Rendezvous during the Dick days?
Oh yeah, I saw Dick there.
And how, can you tell us about it? Can you describe it?
Well, the first time I saw that, we had to hitch a ride from somebody because none of us had driver's licenses. So, no, Dick was a very, very powerful, you know, player, loud. Actually, the Rhythm Rockers followed Dick when Dick went to Harmony Park. The Rhythm Rockers came into the Rendezvous as their house band. Well, then we, in essence, came down to challenge the Rhythm Rockers, the Chantays, and the Rhythm Rockers battle of the bands, and we won.
All right, congratulations.
And no, the whole overall thing has been just an incredible experience, you know, been able to work with so many great, fine groups. A lot of the surf bands, I mean, you know, guys like the Safaris and Dick, the Tornadoes, the Astronauts, worked with them, did shows with them in Japan.
Wow.
And, you know, got to travel around and work with a lot of different artists. That was really very cool.
That's so great. Now, since you brought up Japan, I want to just touch on that for a second. Because that was the interesting thing about it. That is, it was later, and it was actually sort of after the fact, right?
Yep.
Everything was kind of dying down.
We were there in '65.
Right, and it was after everything, and it was just, was it kind of like, hey man, we're putting the band back together, we're going to Japan.
That's in essence about what happened. The cool thing was, at the time we went to Japan, we were like the Beatles here. We were, because of the language barrier, we were the #1 band had the #1 hit in the country, and it was just like they were getting us in and out with armed guards, in limo service, and we're going, whoa, this is cool. So we did about 3 weeks touring from one end of Japan to the other, and just we had a whole troupe with us. We had go-go dancer girls and all kinds of really supportive people in that whole show, and
That was a really positive experience for you guys.
oh, totally. And one thing I got to definitely bless the Ventures for is because of the Ventures, they kept Pipeline going in Japan, because they would do about 80, 90 dates a year in Japan, and I don't know how many different albums they put out, but almost all of them had Pipeline on it. Another funny quick story about that is the Ventures were playing at a club in Santa Ana called the Crazy Horse, and I used to have an office right close to that. And so I went to, I had met them before briefly, but I was there at the show, my wife and I, and I think it was Bob Bogle or Don Wilson introduced me to the crowd, and in his announcement he says, and this is why we can water our lawns with Perrier.
Wow.
I'll never forget that
Mike's.
when he said that.
You would never say something like that.
No.
Yeah.
But it was those guys were great to work with. And I fortunately had a chance to play Pipeline with Don Wilson, at later years at the NAMM show. And,
Cool.
That was, but all the guys, Bob Bogle and Noki, worked with Noki. Well, and Noki was also on the show that Deke Dickerson used to put together.
Right? Yeah, the Guitar Geek Festival.
Yep. So these are all just good memories, and just feel very blessed.
That's so cool, man. Well, we are certainly still huge fans of you and the band and your legacy, and we're all still trying to emulate that. The perfection of Pipeline is just unquestionable. It's such a beautiful, wonderful, different, special thing that has become really sort of a symbol of surf music in general to the world.
Thank goodness it does.
Thank you for that, man. Thank you. I just want to, we'll probably go on to the questions from the audience in a second, but we have to tell this story because it's one of my favorite stories. And I'm going to let you do most of it, but I'll just kind of set it up. So the second gig, so gig number 2, right? You guys must have been, how old were you guys?
16.
16 years old, Tustin Youth Center.
15, 16.
Tustin Youth Center,
Yep.
right over here. And the gear you're using at this point is still with the Montgomery Ward,
Mostly borrowed.
right?
Yeah, borrowed amplifiers, and I'd gotten my Barth guitar.
Right, the bar. Not a Fender.
For my 15th birthday, I asked my dad, I said, Dad, a friend of mine had got one of those Sears in the case amplifier guitars, and I got a chance to play that, and I had asked my dad, I said, Dad, I really would like to, for my birthday, I'd love to get an electric guitar. So he said, okay, well, went down to it's Costa Mesa Music is where I got it. Got an amplifier, a Barth amplifier, and my Barth guitar, by the way, which I still have, the guitar. And I think my dad paid $100, and he used to always tell his friends and buddies, says, that was the best $100 I ever spent.
He's the greatest investments of all time.
Yeah, and Brian had the airline, which was Montgomery, got it at Montgomery Wards, and I believe they were either built by Harmony or Kay. And those two guitars are the ones that we did Pipeline with.
Amazing.
We did update our amplifiers. We got ended up starting out with the Bandmaster and the Basement, blonde ones back then, and then we had our outboard reverbs. And
But you didn't always have the outboard reverb, right?
not in the beginning.
Not in the beginning, until the second show.
Yes.
When you managed to get your hands on a very particular outboard reverb unit, borrowed for the show. Borrowed
Yes,
for the show.
our keyboard player's dad was in the electronic sales business, would sell, and Fender happened to be one of his major clients. And lo and behold, Dick Dale had his reverb in for servers. Well, Rob's dad said, "You think they'd mind if can I borrow this for a couple of days?" And they said, yeah. So I can remember we were sitting in Rob's front living room with one reverb, taking turns plugging it in to see what it would sound like, and we were stoked, totally then.
Now, you guys were like fiending around, like drug fiends, fiending around this reverb unit.
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, we
Sure being Dick
we
Dale.
had never heard a sound like that, and so it was so unique. We went, man, this is cool. So that second gig, that's where we got our money and went out and bought our outboard reverbs. Oh,
I love that story. It's so great.
and I don't think Dick ever knew.
Really?
I might have said something to him at one point in time, but
Hey, thanks for lending us that reverb unit on the second gig.
So yeah, of course he always had sometimes derogatory things about Pipeline, thinking that we ripped him off, which is not true at all. But
Well, the ridiculous thing about that is, it sounds absolutely nothing like Dick Dale in any way, shape, or form.
he called it sewer line.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
No, and Dick was actually very cool. He was a good guy, of course. But the whole thing in the story I like to tell, and it thanks to so many of you folks that bought that little 45, like this, for about 85 cents, whatever it might have been back in the day. And God bless you, helped me put my kids through school.
Hear, hear. Well, we're still listening to it today like it just came out. Like this is the freshest thing ever. It still holds up, man.
I still play it every week. I host a jam session at the American Legion in Newport Beach, and every week we play that. And people,
That's so great, man. And how old are you now?
well, I'll be 80 in February.
80 years old, still playing Pipeline every week, spreading the surf music gospel.
Absolutely. And we play surf music every week at the Legion, so.
Love it. That's so great, man. All right, why don't we open it up? Sorry, Jeff. Sorry. Now I feel bad. Please. I just want to wait for that Jim Frias segue, and then the floor was open. Go ahead. Oh, he would like to know, how did you meet your wife?
I met my wife which is right here. Met my at the Raw.
Always the better half, folks. The ones that really make the stuff happen behind the scenes is always your wife.
We met at the Rendezvous Ballroom in 1964. I was playing at the Rendezvous, and we had not girlfriends, but girls that were friends. This one gal said, "Bob, there's this gal that just moved out from Minnesota, from Minneapolis area," and he said, I think you would really like her." And I went, "Oh, whatever, I guess, yeah." I think I was dating another gal at the time, but he said, "Well, she's going to be with us, I think Friday or Saturday night. I'm going to bring her to the Rendezvous and maybe introduce you." And I said, "Very cool, whatever." So during our first break, I'm walking across the dance floor, and this good-looking gal comes walking the other way. She was like 60 years back when the gals had long hair, and she always carried a brush in her hand. And so I'm walking over to get a soda, and she's walking the other way, and I literally did a double take. And the rest became history. We started dating, and we dated for about 2 years before we got married. Now 3 kids, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandsons later. And we're celebrating, this year will be our 59th wedding anniversary.
Wow. Congratulations. Well, that relationship in and of itself is an inspiration to all of us. Separate from the music. You guys are such an amazing pair, such a duo, dynamic duo. And we love you both, man. Thank you so much for the music.
Oh, well, thank you. God bless all of you people, and thank you so much for making Pipeline what it is today.
Questions? Wow.
Oh, so a lot of the bands have covered Pipeline?
Yes, I personally have over 200 versions.
You did with it.
Yep.
What do you think about that version?
It was punky. No, but it was all appreciated. You know, regardless, I just had to give you another example of something like that is that I'm proud of. A very good friend of mine, Henry Capono, who's going to be at the Coach House tonight, by the way. But anyway, Henry and I have been friends for 20 some odd years, and Henry sent me a clip of the Oyster Bar in Oahu, and so this is a clip of probably one of the best versions of Pipeline I've ever heard, and it just happened to be Billy Gibbons and ZZ Top playing that, and I went, yes. So
Actually, this brings up a very good point. You know, surf or not, Pipeline always ends up being one of the first things or an early thing that a guitar player can really play.
I've had that happen so many times. First time I met Jeff Skunk Baxter was at the NAMM show, and Jeff was there, and I went up and I introduced myself to him. I said, hi Jeff, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your music. And I think he was doing the Doobie Brothers or Steely Dan, one of the two at that time. And I said, my name's Bob Spickard. I said, I wrote Pipeline. He says, you did what? I said, I wrote Pipeline. He said, that's the first guitar song I think I ever learned. And I would have that happen time and time again. Guys would come up and say, you know, that was one of the very, very first songs that I ever learned on the guitar, and I'm teaching my grandson how to play it.
Yeah, I hear that.
Anyway,
constantly.
the Agent Orange was cool, but we get a lot of different versions.
Punky.
The question was about what I thought about the Stevie Ray Vaughan and Dick Dale version. I'm glad it became Grammy nominated. It was not exactly my favorite, but to be honest with you, but I was appreciative of them doing it. And
That answer was a lesson in diplomacy. You notice it was all positive, but we all know what he's thinking. And we're all thinking the exact same thing. Sorry.
well, an interesting offshoot of that too is I was at one time I was on the advisory board at the Hollywood Rock Walk in Hollywood here at the Guitar Center, and we inducted Jimmy Vaughn and Larry Carlton, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, and I'm talking to Jimmy Vaughn, and I said, once again, I introduced myself to him, and he said, you know, Stevie and I used to play Pipeline on one guitar, on top of each other. And he says, that was probably one of the first songs we ever learned too. Another one.
See, them too.
So,
All the guitar gods, this is it. You want to be a guitar god? Start with Pipeline. I remember Randy Holden talking to me about that too, saying, I remember playing Pipeline. I couldn't play anything, but somehow I could get my fingers
You know,
to play the melody of Pipeline.
and there are so many different versions. We've got there's been a country version. Bruce Johnston from the Beach Boys did a disco version of Pipeline.
We won't get into that.
Klebanoff and his orchestra, Lawrence Welk actually did a version too. I've got an album from a high school band in New Jersey that did Pipeline. So I'm very appreciative all the way around.
Well, you know, that's a testimony to good songwriting too. When you're able to arrange it for other kinds of genres, other kinds of music, and it still packs such a wallop and has such an impact and is
still hear the melody.
You know, a good song is a good song, and that's the hardest thing to do, in my opinion. Those good songs, those catchy songs, those memorable, when you have the earworm and it sticks with you, that's the magic. And Pipeline certainly has that magic.
And thanks to you people. Thank you.
Question anymore? Chair?
For those of you that didn't hear it, he said, did you realize that you were part of starting something new and starting a new subgenre or a new wave of something special? And what do you think about all the surf music happening today in the modern world and the fact that it's still growing and still spreading and still so popular?
I think this style of music, in my opinion, remains and hopefully always will be cyclic. It keeps coming back around, you know, and it's a style that it's unique, comparatively speaking, to a lot of genres. Once again, I'm just so very proud to have been and still a part of that whole genre of surf music. You know, we started not thinking we were going to be a surf band. I mean, we kind of, you know, learned our lives basically like Dwayne Eddy, you know, and of course the Ventures, and just so many different styles of music. I'll never forget my dad brought me home a record. He says, "Well, Bobby," he says, "you'll be doing okay if you can play like this guy," and it happened to be Django Reinhardt, Hot Tub of Flames. I said, "Well, little beyond me." Anyway, but once again, I'm just very blessed to have had a song like that.
How's our time, Jeff? Okay. Yeah.
Well, Jeff was just saying he heard a xylophone cover of Pipeline, and it just had a kind of a mystic, kind of a cool tiki type vibe to it. And once again, that goes into the various versions of Pipeline, and we like to think that my great grandchildren may get a little piece of the action. Well, at that point in time, we just didn't realize surf music was what it was going to become. To give you another example, a guy that I learned a lot of lines from was Freddie King. And Freddie King, back in the early 60s, had an album out called Let's Dance and Hide Away with Freddie King. Surf music came about. They said the same album, changed the cover to Let's Go Surfing with Freddie King. Now, something about going surfing with Freddie King. Freddie King was about 6'4", 6'5", about 350 pounds. And if you're surfing with him, you don't want to be having him shoulder hop here. So you just kind of stay out of his way. But anyway, I always thought that rather interesting, that trivia. Yeah, and once again, it considered it part of the surf genre coolness. Hearing Freddie King play Hideaway is one of the first songs I learned.
Of course. Right on. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Kathy,
Jonpaul, thank you
pleasure,
very
man.
much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Chad
Chad.
Anson,
Back,
thank you all.
and we'll get into our regularly scheduled program.